You asked for it, so we are bringing you the first ever after show for Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard. Stay tuned for our big premiere.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Woo! Hello, everybody. Get your sway on to this tune. Yes, we all know this one. Hello, welcome to Something to Wrestle After. We're coming to you from AfterBuzz TV studios in North Hollywood. You guys asked for this show, so we are bringing it to you, all the fans of Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard. This is where you're going to come after you listen to those guys. We cover all the big reveals. We're going to include all your fan reactions. And of course, I have a couple more fans of the show here to chat all about it with me. My name is Christy Olson, and let me introduce you to a man who is the executive producer of YouTube channels for Bruce Pritchard and many other of your favorite wrestling legends. Say hello to Steve Kaufman.
Why, hello, also Philadelphian. Who?
And that, which is important in wrestling.
That is very important in wrestling. It's also very important. We're talking about Rumble 04. It was in Philadelphia. I was not there.
Oh, spoiler alert, not there.
I wasn't there.
Oh, and that second voice you guys might hear might sound very new to you. Please give a rousing hello to comedian, DJ, and host of the Star Trek Discovery After Show here on AfterBuzz TV. It's Flobo Boyce.
How's it going, everybody? I'm from Brooklyn, unfortunately, so no Philadelphia connection, but I'm so glad to be here today.
Well, we are very happy to have you. We're switching this up a little bit. Everybody out there who knows us knows we have a pretty concrete panel. Christian Rosenberg joins us very often, and George Hermosa. So we are so glad to have you, Flobo Boyce. And for everybody out there, since they are getting to know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about your wrestling fandom or your experience in this biz? What brings you here today to talk about this show?
For sure. A lifelong fan of the World Wrestling Entertainment Federation and all that stuff. I also worked at Mach 1 Wrestling in Anaheim and Championship Wrestling from Hollywood as a ring announcer and the ring crew, which, you know, put that little reps in there.
Always.
Yeah, so I'm real familiar with Christian Rosenberg and that crew. So
that's cool. Well, thank you for hanging out with us today. We are so excited to talk about this show with you. Of course, you know, Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard is where we get all the juicy tidbits. This is where we learn everything we didn't know that was going on behind the scenes so long ago. And I want to make sure that you guys all join us live to chat about it because you're fans too. So we are going to be live on YouTube every Sunday at, hang on, give the blonde a sec to do her math, at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. We would love it if you join us in the live chat on YouTube and let us know your thoughts on the show and everything else that's going down. You can also catch us on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe, like, rate. You know, 5 stars is the max. And we're only a few minutes in, but I'm going to go ahead and say this is probably going to be a 5-star show.
I love it.
Well,
So
I heard recently that none of the other stars on iTunes work. It's a weird glitch. It's new in 2019.
Imagine
but
that.
I think they're trying to work toward a pass-fail system.
Right.
But there's no fail. Like no stars, no review is a fail, and then a pass is 5 stars. I've heard that that's what's happening. I don't know.
Rumors and innuendo.
The rumor and innuendo is, God, I spend so much time in these walls doing wrestling podcasts trying not to use Pritchardisms. But I'm actually on the podcast where I get to use them.
Now you finally have a place.
Right.
Finally. And this AfterBuzz TV is a place where all TV fans can come and join together and share in their fandom. Why don't you tell us a little more about it, Steve?
So, we just wanted to say thank you for making us the ESPN of TV talk. For us to continue to grow, we could use your help. Please make sure to subscribe to one or more of our YouTube pages. This YouTube page you're watching us on is the wrestling and sports YouTube page. There's a lot of great after shows on here. The After 83 Weeks after show started there. The Raw show, SmackDown show, NXT show, the pay-per-view show, which you'll see me and most of the regular crew on next Sunday for the Royal Rumble 2019.
Yeah.
All of that stuff. Also, as we mentioned, you got to give us a rating on iTunes. That helps the show you love get seen by more people so that the show you love can be shared with people you know and love. You also have to leave us a comment on iTunes. We'll shout you out on air. Also, leave us a comment here below the video about how awesome we are. And being a part of AfterBuzz TV has meant a lot to me because it's given me the visibility as a pundit, a wrestling pundit. Because I'm not a journalist and I'm not a fan. I'm a wrestling pundit is my official terminology. And it's given me such visibility as a pundit that I'm able to DM people like Conrad Thompson and tell them, hey, I'm also a guy who can build your YouTube page, and I was able to build YouTube pages, and I don't know if I'd have had that visibility without AfterBuzz TV, and that opportunity only existed to me because people helped AfterBuzz TV grow. So that's the big part. Thank you all so much for supporting us, and that's. Yes.
Well, I'm gonna dab my eye there. Gonna give everyone a second to reach for the tissues on that one. Thank you, Steve Coffin.
Reading the How Live chat real quick. Haywood wants you to say "I love you" in the Pritchard voice.
I love you.
Awesome.
Yes.
I was waiting for that.
Oh, I have so many of these bouncing around my head. It's gonna be bad.
We are officially off to the best start ever, but we should probably jump into a little bit of Royal Rumble 2004. Now, of course, this is controversial because, according to Conrad, it's because WWE is not going to talk about this. I think that is a safe bet. Let's kind of cover where WWE is at this time. Bruce says, they're kind of experiencing a changing of the guard at this time. There is the idea to bring Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit up and to have them go over in a big way, as Bruce Pritchard says, and we'll chat about how all that happens. But this kind of opens up with, they're even talking about, should we be doing this? Should we be covering this? That conversation kind of happens at the end. But how do you guys feel about talking about Royal Rumble 2004?
I think it's perfectly fine to talk about Royal Rumble 2004. It's perfectly fine to talk about Chris Benoit, the television character, as it happens organically. What they didn't talk about was, well, where were you that day in Texas?
Right.
When he didn't turn up and things were happening in Atlanta, where, where's this person, where's that person? We're going to do a whole conspiracy theories podcast, which those people exist. I think that's inappropriate, especially for this show where they talk about the in-ring, the TV production side, and what Chris Benoit will sadly be most known for happened in 2006. This pay-per-view was 2004 and was two of his best moments. Probably his second best moment of his career happened in this pay-per-view where he eliminated Big Show by himself. I also think when people say, this is uncharted territory, I think O.J. Simpson kind of charted the territory. How the NFL handles O.J. Simpson, I think, makes the territory pretty clear of how you deal with someone who did something.
That's a great
and his
point.
name becomes mud. The NFL doesn't talk about O.J. Simpson unless they absolutely have to. Someone broke his rushing record today. They'd have to mention they broke O.J. Simpson's rushing record. Because everything's gimmicked in the WWE, they don't have to talk about Chris Benoit ever again.
Yeah, they've been very, very sensitive with that. I do think you should talk about Chris Benoit's win and the way he won, right? The one, Drew number one in the Rumble. You can't really ignore that. Today I was actually refreshing myself with the pay-per-view, and it's kind of interesting how they have not one, not two, but three disclaimers when you load that program, and that says a lot of how they're trying to handle it. Yeah.
Because from 2006 when it happened to 2013, 2014, whenever the actual network released, anything, and it would mainly be Rumble 04, Mania 20, and then
TLC 3. TLC 3?
Yeah, and then TLC 3, and then anything he headlined, they either had to severely rewrite the copy or avoid selling that DVD altogether. I think there was a time where you could only buy a Rumble 04 DVD post 06 if you bought it as a part of a box set. That they wouldn't even sell it to you up front, even though John Cena was on the cover.
And it seems like maybe since this all happened so long ago, is this conversation even relevant about whether we should have the conversation? But this is the exact same thing that's happening in music right now with R. Kelly.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's more difficult in music because that's something that exists forever. That's also something that's happening in comedy right now. I think I don't want to get into, because that gets into a larger point of censure that I don't want to actually get involved in because it's a wrestling show, but I do think if you get to gimmick your own history, if you get to create the narrative that people are seeing, you do get the choice to say, we're never going to mention this person ever again because of what he did. And I think that's a fair point to take for the WWE. I think for something to wrestle with, they are free to say, we're going to talk about the industry as it was in 2000, as it was at the beginning of 2004. And we can't not mention this man.
Right, absolutely. And really the whole show kind of kicks off with this conversation about the big choice to put Chris over. And Bruce does admit that there are some questions about whether Benoit had the personality behind the scenes. But as we learn a little bit later, there were a lot of big names pushing for Chris Benoit. Was that something you guys were surprised to hear?
Actually, I would say no. I do think for someone who performs on both sides, watching as a fan and someone that worked to perform, there's almost appreciation for someone who comes in, puts their head down, and works in their craft. So having those people in the boys in the back, right, say, this guy, he comes in early, they're usually the first one to show up, the last one to leave, gear is always in the back trunk. There should be some sort of reward for that,
Yeah, I was shocked to hear, harkening back to how I felt about Triple H in 2004, up through he founded NXT pretty much.
Hot take.
But I'm not alone. Like, that was the perception of Triple H around that time, like the post-Rock, pre-Cena time, that he felt like he was next in line to be the next Rock, and he didn't care that he wasn't as popular as the Rock. Like, some would argue that's how Triple H felt, how Triple H handled things. The Booker T WrestleMania is a very good example of times where Triple H would just kind of get out his shovel. So to look back at 2004 and to hear that Triple H was a huge proponent for anyone else to win anything ever sounded crazy to me. But if you look at what he's done since the Performance Center, which I believe was like 2011, 2012, it makes a lot more sense to me that he actually cared about the business. He just didn't see a future in the guys that he buried. I can disagree with him there.
Wow, mic drop.
I love that. Well, despite some people questioning about Benoit's personality, they talk about how this was a time when Vince loves storytelling. Obviously, he's all about telling a story in a match, and that was his big thing during this time. He thought he could tell a good story with this Royal Rumble. Do you guys think of this as being a storyline-driven time in WWE?
Wow.
Yes. I think the storylines were hit or miss.
Okay. I agree with that.
Because there were, yes, I think it was a very much storyline driven. I also think there was, in 04, 05, there was never a more clear division of what SmackDown was versus what Raw was. There was never a more clear brand division of what SmackDown looks like, which is John Cena, who at the time had a gimmick, yes, but was also an incredible wrestler who can go toe-to-toe with Kurt Angle on his first night there. Chris Benoit, the SmackDown, Edge was on SmackDown for a while, and SmackDown always came off as the more wrestler show, and that Raw came off like the more showy show. I remember the summer before this, I think 03 would have been the Kane unmasking, and there's a lot of gaga, as they say, in that match, in that whole angle, that it's Kane's unmasking that doesn't happen in the ring. It happens when he tries to burn JR, or when RVD tries to stop him backstage, and there's all this other stuff that isn't in the ring. Whereas I think SmackDown's storylines begin and end in the ring at that time, whereas Raw's begun backstage and then ended wherever they ended.
Yeah, good point.
Wherever they ended, sometimes they were funeral homes.
Yeah. Got reference.
Well, we all know where Goldberg was at this point, and we do get some juicy tidbits about his little temper tantrum backstage at Armageddon after his match with Triple H. Did Bruce's account, did that shed any light on the story for you? Was this something you guys had heard about before? Did you want the details? Did you need the details? Do you feel like you got the full story now?
Yeah, I always felt that Goldberg had a diva streak. And we can say diva now because the other thing is kind of an old term.
Right.
And that he had the talent and he was built up and he he did the work and he had the physique and everything, but it was almost like, I am a star, I know what I was, I don't feel like I should take that extra step of explaining my trajectory or my motivations as much. And I always felt that when he came to a situation where it was, all right, here at Goldberg, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do this, A, B, and C. And he's like, well, why not go to C? I'm Goldberg. Why not?
Hearing about Goldberg now in the WWE, and the reason I feel like the reason Goldberg fizzled out in the WWE is that you talk about A, B, and C. The Goldberg character, the whole gimmick of that character was to skip B.
Right.
That was the whole and I was actually listening to the Eric Bischoff one about Chris Jericho and how Chris Jericho wanted a match with Goldberg and was kind of running him down in the ring on Nitro and wanted this match with Goldberg and was mimicking Goldberg in the midst of the streak, and he was like, well, I want to have a match with him on a pay-per-view and I want to sell tickets and build to it. And Eric explains it now, the kind of match Chris Jericho wants to have with Goldberg cannot happen.
Right.
Goldberg cannot deliver on a more than 3-minute squash match. It took him a really long time to get there, and I think he got there in the later part of his career, that most recent Universal title run. He actually had something that showcased him in a way where he didn't just skip B. But I think here, and I also find this was a credit to Goldberg, that he was so upset whatever he planned on doing, whatever he thought would happen, whatever the match was going to deliver on, didn't. And he was so upset.
Yeah.
And then when Triple H comes by, oh, hey, great match. Because he didn't blame Triple H. He wasn't hot about like Triple H burying him so much. It's just he was upset that it happened, and that's just how he was reacting.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the commentators. Let's talk about the guys who talk and some of the things that are going on behind the scenes and on camera with Coach and JR. Now, do you guys remember that being a thing?
What Raw was on the
Coach JR's, the coach going after JR, the heat between them?
A little bit.
Is that something that stands out as a fan?
That's something that stands out from like '99.
I guess for me, the heel coach being
Well,
that sticks out more, and that like JR was almost like a intentional thing that happened as a result of him being the coach, you know.
But Bruce gives us kind of all this info about, here's where the idea came from, here was the objective for it. We learned that JR really took some of this stuff very personally. Yeah. Did you feel like that's the JR you guys have heard about before?
Yeah, I feel like JR, even though he has a reservation the way he does, he's always hard on the sleeve. You know, whether he's selling barbecue sauces or selling a match, the fact that if you look back over the years of what they put him through, like beating him up and putting him on fire, sometimes it kind of feels like a sideshow. And I think he really thinks he's a journalist. He is a journalist.
And drafting him without telling him. That was another very famous JR moment where Vince McMahon drafted him to SmackDown.
Right.
And did not, you can tell from the look on his face that it's just... And what was funny about that moment, I'm sidetracking a little, is he got up from the SmackDown table, walked over, and then just grabbed Michael Cole's chair while Michael Cole was in it.
Yeah.
Just pretty much like, well, kid. Like,
ooh, we're going to SmackDown.
I'm not third chairing to Michael Cole. I'm Jim Ross.
Right. And it's so weird they're saying how Michael Cole might be the voice for a whole generation, but I'm getting off topic. Totally getting off topic. But so the thing with Coach, for example, it maybe as a professional, it didn't matter as much. It's like, well, I'm willing to do this for Coach as a character, but it has to be a point in time where you're like, I'm not a sideshow. Everything supposed to happen over there. I'm here to watch the monitor and call the matches.
Well, I think he's old school enough, and I think Coach came from ESPN, and then he went back to ESPN, and now he's back. So Coach came from a more entertainment presentation side, and not a journalist side, and definitely not a Carney side.
Right.
Because the Carney side of old school wrestling that Jim Ross came up through, the idea that Coach is doing something to put himself over Jim Ross makes no sense to Jim Ross. Because how does that sell tickets to the two guys in the ring?
Right.
Like, how does that... Jim Ross is very clean-cut in that way, that he's like, no, I gained the credibility over a long period of time to be this Southern wrestling commentator, so that when I say, by God, Austin, by God, he's broken in half, that means everything. Because... he doesn't play a favorite. He's not biased. He's not a character. Whereas I think when the WWE now, their commentary goes a little off the rails, it sounds like a morning zoo, or like a morning zoo on a local FM station on top of a wrestling match. But on occasion, they'll mention that a wrestling match is happening. It's like a bad watch along, pretty much.
Like that style shoot. It's like I know the moves and the holes in the ring, but everything else, you know.
Pretty much, and like that's fine, but I don't know how that gets the match over. It gets the people in commentary over, but what? None of them people are selling tickets.
Right.
Is the fundamental.
That's a very good point, gentlemen. Well, the stuff that I like to hear about on this show is, the really scandalous behind the scenes, like the things you would only ever know or hear if you were a fly on the wall in an arena in 2004. However, Wade Keller has his ways, as he did even back in the day. And this dirt sheet report comes out at the time about a meeting that Vince has where he talks to the wrestlers about taking responsibility. He says, maybe these numbers are down, or this could be better, and what, according to Bruce, was meant to inspire them, they maybe took in a way that he didn't intend to. Did you guys find this as fascinating as I did?
I'm sure you found this very fascinating for a variety of reasons, but I found this interesting of how Vince was treating a top guyless company in 2004, because I think that's the big thing about. And I think it's really interesting we're talking about 2004 right now, because that's where the WWE is currently, is that they're top guyless.
Right. Oh my God.
Ultimately, if you want to go the link of top guys, which isn't the same as a lineage of world champions, in the modern era, you have Hogan. Then a little bit between Hogan and, like, I would argue between Hogan and Austin, you had guys like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, and it wasn't top guy list because they still had top draws. Mm-hmm. But after Austin, it was The Rock. And then there was this lull that we're talking about now before John Cena. John Cena was not coronated for another 13 months after Rumble 04. It was the Mania after Chris Benoit.
21, right?
Yeah, WrestleMania 21 in Staples Center was John Cena's coronation. He had been branded a little bit after this whole time. Like, probably the Mania match with Big Show, he had been branded. But, like, John Cena... So, how Vince tells talent that there's a brass ring and any of you can have it is what... I think is what...
That's the message you think he was going for.
I think it was the message he was trying to tell everyone. Mm-hmm. Because Triple H isn't a top draw like Hogan would be, or like... Because after John Cena, it was Roman Reigns, and that's what I'm talking about, that now that WWE is currently top draw list, top guy list.
Right.
Because Brock Lesnar is a special attraction.
I totally agree with that, but as on the other side too, if you're that guy in the room and someone goes, "There's a brass ring, go ahead and get it." You're like, well, what does that mean? If I'm out on TV this week, I'm catering. Do I go out there and wrestle in front of people on the streets? Like, what do I have to do?
Right.
In 04, that means something completely different.
Right, it totally does. And I can see, like, I'm a sports guy, and the guy in baseball, when the manager goes in the mound, it can have a negative effect on your pitcher because now he's frazzled. Someone had to come over there and say, "Step it up."
Right.
But I was eating grilled chicken and kale. What do I have to do? Okay, I'll step it up, sure, and it was kind of disappointing.
I do read into the credence a bit of how Raw sees SmackDown versus Raw. Or how Vince sees SmackDown versus Raw.
Yeah.
That he had a meeting with the SmackDown locker room and kind of talked down to them, and had a meeting with the Raw locker room and kind of spoke to them at their level, if not talking up to them.
You're right. That says so much.
About how he sees those shows, not necessarily those people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's hard to not take that personally when it's your livelihood, it's your life.
Right.
In 04, it was still on broadcast TV, I think, like my network TV.
SmackDown was on
CW?
probably CW. This was Warner Bros. It was before the CW.
UPN.
It would have been UPN, yes.
Okay.
Because it was before UPN and
UPN.
Yeah.
yes, UPN. but also that SmackDown deal was huge to be on free TV.
You know what else is huge? Trish Stratus's balls.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Listen, as someone who's been there, I can't believe that she had the balls to ask a question in a meeting like this. Praise to her. Obviously, she was in a much different position than I was ever in. But the fact that she said, "Oh, you want to know if anyone has any questions? I have a question. Here it is. Let's hear the answer." And not at all surprised to hear about what happened to her after that. And I think Bruce Pritchard even he confirmed that she was mocked and kind of said, like, yeah, she shouldn't have asked the question.
Well,
Sure, maybe it was a dumb question.
That'll teach her to get that brass ring.
But just the fact that she asked it makes me happy.
I don't think her question was that dumb either.
Oh, not
Okay,
at all.
good.
Because fundamentally, and coming from someone like Trish Stratus is actually very fascinating to hear, because you wouldn't think she was the most fundamental wrestling psychologist, if you will, because her idea is selling tickets. Because if you pack the building, the building's happy, my paycheck's bigger, everyone's paycheck's bigger, rising tides. So, packing the building every night, we're only doing TV 3, maybe 4 days a week. You're talking to me about packing the building, fundamental wrestling. You're talking about house shows.
Right.
And house shows, at that time, at least to her, didn't make any sense. But if you have TV should build the house shows. And, like, she was asking a very valuable question of, like, what should I be doing day to day to put both things over? So if you're asking, because he's essentially asking everyone to put all of their efforts into TV, which is a rights deal they're not cut into, and then one house a week. But then you're telling me that's going to make business better. My question to you is, how does that make business better if the TV's doing nothing to serve of the 300 dates, 200 of which aren't TV? Like, how is that like, that was her question. I don't think it was a dumb question, and I do think if Chris Benoit's a bad example. If Eddie Guerrero asked it, I don't think he would have been ridiculed. I also think Eddie Guerrero would have done what Bruce is saying, which is when the boss man asks if you have questions, the answer is no.
Right.
But I don't agree with that either. If you're asking me for questions, if you're going to ask your talent for questions, they should ask questions. They should ask good questions. I thought it was a good question.
So Trish's question was more about, hey, look, many of the matches in these house shows are not relating to storylines. We're just doing this like random mishmash. And I was waiting for Bruce to bail Vince out and say, well, maybe they're experimenting with other cast of characters.
Yeah.
But the fact that it was kind of like, what are you doing? Like, it was like, how dare you ask a question? It's
Like,
so weird to me.
Well, and I understand that's a very tight ship with a very tight schedule. So that for Vince to say, I want to talk to everybody for 30 minutes, he said something like, I'm going to talk to them for 30 minutes. He talked to them for an hour and then said, any questions? And Bruce is looking at the watch, like, I need to get this guy to a Make-A-Wish. I need to get this guy to a promo. I need to get this guy to a makeup chair. These 3 guys need to talk about their match. Like, Bruce as a producer was saying, like, God, this meeting, no one's question is going to get a clean answer.
Right.
That no one should ask a question. That's ultimately where he came from, but he did confirm that Trish Stratus was belittled for asking a very legitimate question when asked to ask legitimate questions.
God, this stuff is so juicy. I love it. All right, well, let's squeeze the real juice. Let's go to Philadelphia and tend this Royal Rumble. They didn't have a ton to say about the first few matches.
Well.
Besides the fact that the Dudleys were really in awe of working with Ric Flair. I think nowadays, now they've just been around so long, now anyone would be in awe of them. That to hear that the Dudleys were in awe of working with Ric Flair, which of course they would be, but to hear that, just I'm like, oh, that's so cute.
That is so cute. Correct me on the date, but the Dudleys came to the WWE in 2000 or 99.
Definitely before 2000.
So like
2000 was Triangle Ladder
So
match.
like that's not too far from them working in bingo halls.
That's true.
With other guys on their level. No offense to everyone in ACW, but there were other guys on the Dudley Boys' level to then be working with Ric Flair. Like, I think there's a time to be in awe. I don't think it actually affected this match so much as they probably got their time cut.
Oh, right.
Like a lot of those tag matches at that time got their time cut. It was very well noted that Evolution, because Evolution faced for the tag titles at that Mania. I believe it was The Rock and Sock, I believe it was The Rock and Mick Foley. It was definitely Mick Foley at WrestleMania 20, and Mick Foley mentioned in his book that they cut 5 minutes off that match right before the curtain, and it destroyed the match. So they cut a lot of time from tag teams at that time.
Right.
But to the point, yeah, Ric Flair did look good for his age.
Yes.
It was weird not seeing him in a robe. It was like he felt like he was naked, you know?
Yeah.
I'm glad they touched on that because it seems like something that's so minuscule. And of course, maybe someone who's not a wrestling fan, maybe they just walked into the room and overheard what you all are listening to out there, and they're like, "Who cares? Wait, who's wearing a robe? Why are they wearing a robe? Who cares?" That is a huge deal. Okay,
It's like Okada in the trunks.
Right.
It's a big deal, y'all.
Yeah, it's like John Cena wearing a suit. It's kind of weird. You know?
He'd wear jorts with that suit.
I love that. Well, it wasn't a whole lot to say about Rey Mysterio and Jamie Noble either. However, I just love me some Jamie Noble.
Me too.
Yeah.
And Nydia. I thought Nydia was a very unsung hero of that time.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, the thing that stuck out to me about Bruce's comments about the Eddie Guerrero and Eddie Guerrero match is that Bruce said that he was texting recently with Chavo, even while Chavo was on set of the Glow show. Obviously, this was a while ago, but that even to this day, he was like, "Hey, remember that match and how great it was?" I love that.
Yeah.
Reliving the glory days, and just the fact that so many of these guys say, "Well, I don't keep in touch. I don't keep in touch with everybody. Maybe I see him at a signing." Just the idea of these two texting back and forth about the good old days just makes my heart flutter.
Yeah, war stories, yeah.
Right? I just love it. I love it. Well, we are full bore now, so we might as well go forward with Brock Lesnar versus Bob Holly for the heavyweight title. This is a rematch, of course. Bruce characterized this as believable as hell. Stiff, brutal. You guys, I know you said you watched this back again.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you thought back then? And did it change from what you thought watching it back today?
So here's my thing about Royal Rumble matches, historic title matches. I always love the fact they would just moonshot this mid-carder who has no chance of winning into this match. So back then I thought, oh my gosh, hardcore Holly's getting a shot.
Huge.
It doesn't hold up well at all.
Really? The match or the...
I think the idea of putting Holly in that match, I feel like I shouldn't have been at the Royal Rumble. I feel like that could have been totally...
But that's the risk you take at the... And actually, I've never heard it this way, but you're right. The world title match at the Royal Rumble, more often than not, except for The Rock and CM Punk.
Oh, yeah.
More often than not, like, I remember it was the Garden Rumble, it was Jeff Hardy and who was champion. Triple H wasn't champion at that time. I don't remember who was champion at that time, but it was Jeff Hardy, and I remember being there thinking, is Jeff Hardy going to become world champion in Madison Square Garden, not on the top of the card? And then it's going to, because by that point, you knew No Way Out was going to be an elimination chamber, and a lot can happen that he probably won't be champion heading into WrestleMania. He wound up losing and being pulled from the Money in the Bank ladder match that year, just to talk about it. But you're right, you run that risk when you do that, when you give guys this chance.
Yeah.
Looking back, you're like, man, Bob Holly didn't amount to the spot they gave him in this Royal Rumble.
Right.
And I think part of the problem is he's not what they want, especially on the Raw brand. This is all SmackDown. Never mind.
He was
He's kind of what Paul Heyman would have wanted on that SmackDown brand.
Yeah, he was a hard hitter. He was a bruiser. I mean, definitely a character that I've come to appreciate. But I really felt like at the end of that match, watching it today, of course, I was like, I remember liking this way better 14 years ago, 15 years ago. So.
I think it's a comment I make a lot about people like Bob Holly, who I don't necessarily want to hear say very much. People like Brock Lesnar too is like, God, this business needs 15 Paul Heymans.
Right.
If I find a way to make clones, I'm going to clone Paul Heyman, and I will help so many people get money.
This is Jeff Hardy versus Edge versus Orton was the match? Was that the match from the Garden Rumble?
Right. I thought it was just Jeff Hardy and Edge.
Okay.
Well, the reason why I asked, what you thought of watching it now versus back in the day is because this is something that Bruce touched on for the next match about Triple H and Shawn Michaels, that he said new fans watching this now are probably going to crap all over the finish. But back then, it accomplished everything they needed it to do. There was a lot of little tidbits throughout this episode about the Triple H Shawn Michaels thing. Anything that stood out particularly to you guys?
Onto this one.
This was always kind of a forgotten feud for me because these guys, for lack of a better word, go to the well a little. Since 2004, they've gone to this well quite a bit, but they've done it pretty tactfully. That when Michael started working with Taker, when Michael started working with Flair, they would tie them back into each other, and now even recently they tagged with the Brothers of Destruction. Whereas this is the fundamental. I guess a three-way at WrestleMania by now seems really strange, whereas then it would have been inventive and cool.
Yeah.
To be like, we have a hold up in the world title. Personally, I think if you have a last man standing match and your planned finish is for neither man to answer a 10 count, you should hold up the world title. Neither man should hold it until WrestleMania. I think.
Ooh, I like that.
Armchair booking. I think armchair booking.
A lot.
Armchair booking. I think that's the only thing I could look back on this entire time and think, do you want to know what would have made Chris Benoit coming into this title picture even more even more depthful? Other than the fact that he has a lot of heat with Triple H and he was on SmackDown and he switched to Raw and to do it, would be if no one was world champion.
Right.
This match for me, I have a lot of mixed feelings with it. The finish didn't bother me as much, but I felt like Michaels had some stamina issues. Triple H wasn't in the best shape of his career either.
Right, they admitted that.
It was kind of drawn out to the point. I felt like if I would have came 2 or 3 minutes earlier, I'd have been like, okay, I can accept this. But it kind of, it draw a little bit too long.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the idea backstage is that they thought it would do more for Chris eventually to go over on both guys. That's a little bit in the future. But it's finally time to talk about the Royal Rumble. I love how they went number by number. We got the full backstage story on this. And Bruce says, looking back on this one, he's proud of this Royal Rumble. Hurricane Helms, of course, getting the first big pop at number 10. Bruce said that was some good stuff. And then they get to this culmination of kind of the first third, that it's those first 2 in that are left again. What about the way that they described this match? Did any of it make you look at it differently?
I remember watching a bit of it back to make the graphic, because for those of you who watch youtube.com/something to wrestle, when I do release a match graphic, I do my best to find a graphic of the wrestler of that time. So it's actually with the Ric Flair in the robe, it's really difficult to find a graphic of Ric Flair from 2004 that has the background cut out, that's high resolution, where he's not wearing a robe.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
And I'm pretty sure the graphic I went with, he's wearing a robe, and it's like the fairly timeless Ric Flair graphic, and similar to look back on this match, especially after 99.
Right.
Which Rumble 99 was definitely the tale of Austin McMahon.
Yeah.
And then kind of sort of a bunch of jobbers. Very few people felt credible in Rumble 99, whereas Rumble 04, it's like the year later they coronated John Cena.
Right.
looking equal to Randy Orton. So Randy Orton and John Cena in this match both looked like they could win. There were, I think, something like 8 or 9 giants in this match, including the Big Show. If you include like A-Train or Rikishi or like Kane, there are a lot of really big people in this match that it's like, well, how do you, like, they always like to play that up in a Royal Rumble match. That I thoroughly enjoyed this one. And the story of Chris Benoit is helpful, that you have a lot of other big personalities and big stories involved in the match that you can, and to let him go over an hour really helps solidify this is who Chris Benoit is. He's a workhorse. He might not say very much on the microphone. That's not what you're getting with him. What you're getting with him is someone who can go an hour and look like a killer, who can take Big Show out by himself. I'm sounding like Paul Heyman, but I'm okay with it. Allow me a volley, sir.
Well, but not only Chris, but Bruce tells us what they were thinking behind the scenes at the time made a good Rumble match. And that was that these last 7 guys that were left, any one of them would have been acceptable to be in the main event at WrestleMania.
Sure.
It's interesting that that's the thought process,
That is
isn't
the thought process, and hearing more about the structure of Royal Rumble and how you do the eliminations to exemplify that totally made the most sense. You're in Philadelphia, hot crowd. Chris Benoit is probably endeared to them and vice versa. But for the casual guys, it's like, oh, that guy's team around from matches to matches. What can he do? So not only we saw his stamina, we saw his movesets, we saw the fact that he had strength and power. I think after that, they were doing the is for real gimmick or tagline with the merchandise or something like that. But I felt like that was really the showcase of saying if he had a championship match, that Rumble match would be the one to say, okay, he can go the distance.
Also, he was similar. I was mentioning Jeff Hardy in whatever year the MSG show was. I want to say it was 06. There are a lot of people who edge around like a couple years later. There are a lot of folks who get the buzz in the WWE as the best person to have never been world champion. Like Rob Van Dam heading into One Night Stand.
What a crappy guy. To work your whole entire life and to want only one thing and to never get it, I can't imagine.
But
as someone who got the one thing and just realized they didn't want it, that's different. To still want it and not get it, that pains me.
Fair, but at least
it makes me hurt inside for those people.
But it's a good story. But it makes you hurt inside that Chris Benoit, all around, like just storyline wise, he's never won a world championship. Which, oddly enough, this Wednesday we'll be covering Sold Out 2000, which he actually became a world champion, but it was so brief that no one remembered it at the time.
Right.
That you spoke very highly of the fact that Chris Benoit has never been a world champion, and that pained a lot of us. That it's like, that guy, he's been a workhorse for so many people for so long that for him to get a shot, that immediately makes him a babyface without him saying a word.
Right. Well, and we also learned from Bruce about Chris's reaction to all of this, which is what I really wanted to know. He said Chris was ecstatic and that he was grateful. It was a really huge deal to him that they had considered him to even be the champion and that they had the confidence in him to do that. That was the moment I wanted to hear most. Yeah. That was the question I wanted most answered. How about you guys?
He didn't get a dancing gimmick. He didn't have to wear a fedora. You know, the most kookiest thing was called Be Called a Rabbit Wolverine, but he owned that too, and he got to the top. Man.
Well, he was called a crippler earlier in his career because Sabu was almost crippled.
Right.
Like, that's where it came from. So a Rabbit Wolverine, like, I don't know. He was someone who, the uninitiated, you were talking about someone coming into the room hearing you talking about wrestling or watching wrestling. I remember there were a couple guys that my dad, who does not actively watch wrestling, would come into the room while I was watching them and be like, I buy this. Okay. Perry Saturn was actually one of them.
That's always a good gauge.
That my dad saw Perry Saturn in the late 90s and was like, that guy is a killer. Back when I'm realizing now that's the circle I'm talking myself into when talking about Chris Benoit. But that is something to be said, that he doesn't have to say anything to come off as, I really want him to beat Triple H and Shawn Michaels.
Right, but really that's how I know how to regard some of these wrestlers, is because we sit and watch here at AfterBuzz, and then people who have never seen wrestling in their entire lives come up and they're like, wait, what is this? What is this guy? What's he doing? Why is he doing that? And when you can capture that attention of someone who's not at all a fan, it says a lot.
I remember, to that example, very early main roster Charlotte Flair matches used to draw crowds in this park, in this hallway.
Yeah.
Like, it would just be a regular Monday night, and she'd do a moonsault from the top onto the apron, and it would be the 3 hosts that were covering Raw, and then like 3 engineers and like 5 other hosts. We're all watching that match.
No one's running these AfterBuzz shows. They're just all going on.
It's like the 90 Day Fiance people were like, oh man.
Who is that girl?
It's Ric
She
Flair's
looks like
daughter.
she needs a husband from abroad. I love it. Well, did you guys notice when you were watching this Rumble, did you buy John Cena's knee injury? Like, did you think it was legit? Were you concerned for him? Do you remember?
That's hard to tell.
It's hard to look. It's hard to watch it this week and think John Cena wasn't invincible in 2004.
Right?
Because he didn't get hurt until 06, 07. Like, it took him a long time to actually get hurt for the very first time.
Yeah.
Because the time off he took around this time, 04, was storyline wise so he could go shoot the Marine, because that was them branding him as the top guy.
That's right.
He's going to be in movies that are in theaters and our world champion.
Sure, there's a certain look that performers have when they are hurt and trying to cover it up. That's very apparent. At least for me, very apparent.
Agreed.
It's like, no, I'm fine. It's like, that to me was like the X. Like, that to me, I felt like it was legit.
Fair. I think the WWE, in my understanding of watching a lot of WWE versus other companies, if someone's hurt and it wasn't part of the plan, more often than not, you don't see it.
Right, exactly.
Because someone in the booth goes, that wasn't supposed to happen. Don't cut to John Cena ever again. Like, don't cut to John Cena ever again.
Exactly.
He's legit hurt. He's not involved in the match. Get him out. Like, get him out of there. We'll cut to the hard cam, make sure we don't see it.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you guys want to add about this chitter chatter about Royal Rumble 2004?
I think it was a bright spot in the ruthless aggression era. I mean,
Yeah.
Even with the eventual winner having his eventual legacy, I think it was a bright spot way from top to bottom. Even though some of the matches were kind of short, it's enjoyable and definitely worth rewatching.
I'll say it. I think this was the best Philadelphia Royal Rumble. This was the best Philadelphia Royal Rumble match, and there have been 4 if you include the women's match.
All right.
If you include the women's Royal Rumble match from last year, I think this tops them all.
And now that you have heard the take from a guy who was really there and making it happen, do you look at it any differently? You appreciate it more or less?
I do, for sure. I do.
Appreciate it more?
Yeah, I feel like there's so many moving parts. I mean, of course, there's people in the match and all that, but there's so many moving parts beyond personnel, beyond time and staff that make you think, like, wow, to pull on a show that doesn't suck. It's a whole level other.
I think this gave me a lot of appreciation for the strength in their gun-shyness on 3 stars we now know to be mega superstars,
Right.
which are Randy Orton, John Cena, and Batista. And their gun-shyness isn't the word so much as their patience with these guys are going to be huge stars, but they don't need...
Flobo and I were just talking about patience there before.
Yeah, we were.
They'll be like, it'll mean so much more when Randy Orton and John Cena are the final 2 in 05.
Right.
And they go out at the same time, and Vince McMahon himself has to restart the match. They've looked equal to each other in this match, and they'll look equal to each other as pretty much co-winners the next year, although John Cena was the sole winner.
That's right. Oh, wow. Well, this is so much fun, you guys.
Yeah, it is.
I'm really excited to cover Psycho Sid next week. Anything you're dying to hear about? Questions you need to get answered?
I gotta see how big of a fan of baseball. I'm kidding.
I've heard as a pundit, especially around 04, 05, up through the 2010s, you had always heard that Psycho Sid's back at the gym. He looks real good.
Yeah.
And WWE's taking a look. But then, like, a lot of the times up before Pritchard left that place, you kept hearing these rumblings that Psycho Sid might come back.
Well, you know he's going to address those rumors.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And we want to talk about the show with you guys. So tell them where to find you guys online, what you're up to, all that good stuff. Steve?
You guys can find me on Twitter almost exclusively. I am at Steve Kaufman. That is KAUFMANN. I run a lot of YouTube pages for some of your favorite wrestling podcasts. If I've retweeted the link, odds are I'm involved.
And you can find me, Flobo Boys, over at Instagram at Flobito and at Flobito.com.
And if you enjoyed this show, please also watch. I'm going to get all my afters mixed up around here. Please also watch After 83 Weeks with Christy Olsen. That is on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. You guys can always hit me up at Christy Reports and let us know what you think about something to wrestle with Bruce Pritchard so that we can shout you guys out and read all your comments on air. Thank you so much for joining us for our big premiere. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.